The history that we want to tell you begins with the independence of Afghanistan and British colonialism, and continues until the war between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union. This is the date of the arrival of communism in Afghanistan. After many wars and conflicts, Afghanistan finally became independent in 1919. At this time, the Soviet Union had just formed and established good relations with independent Afghanistan, so that most of Afghanistan's trade was with the Soviet Union. The Soviets gradually increased their influence in Afghanistan. We are reaching the point where the soldiers of the Afghan army used to go to the Soviet territory, and there they would inculcate Marxist communist thoughts in their brains, and they would return to Afghanistan with a positive view of these things and start serving. The same soldiers and various Soviet influences caused Marxist communist ideas to spread among the people, and many became supporters of it. This increase in supporters led to the formation of the first Afghan Communist Party in 1965, People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan. Of course, no one knew at that time, but now everyone understands that anywhere that has this name of creation and such things does not have a happy ending, and in the end, they destroyed the same people or people in different ways. Let's go back to history. If you want to know the fate of Afghanistan at that time, stay with me until the end of the video. As time went on, there were more communist supporters. At that time, Muhammad Zahir Shah was the king of Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a kingdom, but the poison of communist propaganda had taken root in the country, so that in the year 1973, Muhammad Zahir Shah was removed by the coup d'etat of Muhammad Dawood Khan, and the Republican regime was established. Dawood Khan became the first president of Afghanistan. Dawood Khan remained in this position for 5 years, but the communist parties were much more powerful than this government, and that's why the same parties staged a coup and executed Dawood Khan, and the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan was formed at that time. In other words, it means a Soviet puppet government in Afghanistan. At this time, Nur Muhammad Turki was appointed as the president of Afghanistan, and Hafizullah Amin became the prime minister of that country. The communists implemented a series of special laws that were not liked by the people of Afghanistan at all, because they were religious, and from that time it was said among the people that these laws were against religion. This communist government that was formed did not have that much control over Afghanistan. People were protesting that they don't want these laws, and the government was suppressing the people with weapons. After this repression, people suddenly came to their senses and said, "Is this communist? You defined other things about communist." That's why the people not only became anti-government but also disliked the whole communist. And this led to the formation of various anti-communist groups, so that after a while, most of the country was not under the control of the government, and only the capital was in their hands. These different groups that were formed were called Mujahideen, and they narrowed the field against the government. We arrive at the 15th of March, 1979. A great uprising against the communists took place in the city of Herat, and the government of Kabul sent its soldiers to suppress the uprising of the people of Herat. But when the government agents arrived in Herat, instead of getting involved with the people, they joined the people. Here, the government of Nur Muhammad Turki became extremely worried and feared for its own future. On the other hand, the Soviet government also looked at these issues. The communist government of Afghanistan was terrified, and when he saw that wherever he sent his agents, they joined the people. That's why he said that he no longer trusts his agents. When Nur Muhammad Turki and his Prime Minister Hafizullah Amin realized that they had no choice. They asked the Soviet government for help. At that time, Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev received this news and replied that we can help, but we cannot send troops. When Leonid refused, Nur Muhammad Turki had a disagreement with his prime minister, and these two people became enemies. A few months later, in October 1979, Nur Muhammad Turki was assassinated. After the Afghan president was assassinated, the main power fell into the hands of Hafizullah Amin. He immediately removed the communist laws to somehow satisfy the people, but it was too late, and the people no longer trusted this government. After Nur Muhammad Turki was assassinated, the Soviet Union no longer counted on this government, and he realized that Hafizullah Amin does not have the power to run the country. Afghanistan was very important for the Soviet Union. He did not want radical Muslims to come to power in Afghanistan at all, because he was afraid that they would influence the Muslims of Central Asia, who made up a large population of the Soviet Union and were all Muslims. On December 12, 1979, Barjarb and Kagbey's agents came to the conclusion that they should assassinate Hafizullah Amin and enter Afghanistan behind him. First, they tried to poison Hafizullah Amin so that he would be killed quietly, but they failed. Meanwhile, Soviet secret agents entered Afghanistan to report the situation. The Soviet spies had all entered Afghanistan illegally, and Hafizullah Amin's government had no knowledge at all. The commander of the Soviet secret agents in Afghanistan was General Yuri Drozdov. Most of these agents were stationed in the Hindu Kush mountains and were monitoring everywhere from afar. A few days had not passed when on December 24, 1979, the Soviet Minister of Defense, Dmitry Ustinov, announced that we should enter Afghanistan for the security of the Soviet Union and the preservation of the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. After this speech, Soviet troops entered Afghanistan. The date, and as you note, there is 1 week left until we reach the year 1980. A large army of 80,000 people entered Afghanistan with all their equipment. Many of the Soviet troops came directly to Kabul by plane and disembarked because Kabul and the government were still communist, so the troops disembarked in Kabul very easily. Hafizullah Amin had no idea that Soviet troops were entering Afghanistan. But when the troops arrived and Hafizullah found out, he was very happy, because he had been asking for help for months, and he was very happy when he saw them coming. But soon his happiness ended, because he realized that the Soviet government did not come to help him. Rather, they came to add a new republic to the Soviet Union, and exactly 100% of the people at work are from the Soviet Union. The Soviets entered Afghanistan on the 24th of December, and exactly 3 days later, on the 27th of December, they took out the body of Hafizullah Amin from the presidential palace, who had been killed by poison. Many said that Amin was killed by beating and his body was never shown. It might be interesting to you that Hafizullah Amin had 24 children at the time of his death, but the Soviets did not spare Amin's relatives and killed most of his colleagues in the government with beatings. Some of them were killed, and some of them were in a coma. The Soviet Union had not sent an ordinary army to Afghanistan. In fact, they had deployed about 1,000 special commandos in Kabul, which were among the best Soviet commandos. And in the same way, they had spread the word of the agents in Afghanistan. The agents did not look Russian. In fact, they were spies who dressed like Afghans and knew their language. That's why it was difficult to recognize them. A part of the democratic government of Afghanistan was stationed in the Tajbek Palace, but Hafizullah Amin was stationed in the presidential palace. So those who were present in the Tajbek Palace did not know that Hafizullah Amin was killed, and they thought that the Russians helped them. have come. They were very happy because they saw that Soviet cannons and tanks were stationed around the palace. But in fact, the barrels of tanks and cannons returned to the palace and shoot at the palace and move forward. Special Forces commandos were lined up to enter the palace. The forces of the Afghan government stood in front of the Russians and shot, threw grenades, but in reality their strength did not reach the Russians, and they were killed very soon. 150 armed Afghan officers were stationed inside the palace, and 24 Special Forces commandos entered the palace through different windows. Afghan soldiers started shooting and managed to kill some of the commandos, but they were commandos and were able to overcome them. Finally, the rest of the forces were forced to surrender to the Russian commandos. At the end of this conflict, all the important parts of Afghanistan fell into the hands of the Soviets, and they were able to take over the entire country. At the end, 5 of the Soviet commandos were killed. The Soviets immediately appointed one person and announced that Babrak Karmal is the leader of Afghanistan from now on. They announced to the people that Hafizullah Amin was executed because he had worked against the people. The people of Afghanistan looked at the Soviets and did not believe any of their words. In that situation, people were getting angrier moment by moment, and they didn't like that situation at all, especially when they understood that the Soviet government had taken over the country. Therefore, an alliance between the people was gradually formed, and everyone said that we should fight against our common enemy. In this situation, there is no meaning of any tribe, and everyone united to fight against a common enemy. When the Soviets entered any country, they took everything under their control very easily and put a puppet as the leader and took control of the country very easily. But Afghanistan was not so easy. A very mountainous country where everyone was an enemy of the Russians. That is, the Soviet forces, which were a superpower, were stationed in a hell. It was very easy for the Russians to take Kabul, and they took it easily, but to control and take the whole country they had to fight in the mountains. What the British did before the Russians, and they did not succeed. You should know that the Soviet Union collapsed due to economic bankruptcy, and one of the reasons for the paralysis of the Soviet economy was the war in Afghanistan. Thank you for being with us so far in the video. To see more videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Until the next video, God bless.